Hi everyone, welcome again to Daytona Office Hours as every week. So as always, we'll do a round of release reviews, what happened in the past week and what we have coming up in the next week, and of course an open for questions and discussions about anything regarding Daytona or anything at all. So let me just share my screen for a sec. Yeah, that should be a little bit more. So since our office hours last week, we reviewed 0370, if I'm not mistaken, and now we have 0380. As you can see, this is quite a feature-packed release, and let's just dive into it. So the first feature we introduced, or actually Tarun, our external contributor, introduced, was OpenID by default on Daytona Create. This was also the first breaking change in this release because it basically removed the code flag from the create command, and the ID now opens by default, while the users can now pass --no IDE if they want to skip actually opening the ID during the creation process. So this is just a convenience and a UX tweak to basically speed up the whole process of creating a workspace and you not having to pass the code flag anymore. Then we have a feature that has been in development for quite a while, and that's multi-profile support for Git providers by John Wick. And this is the second breaking change of this release. So what this change means is that you can now add multiple accounts of the same Git provider to Daytona and then choose between them when you create a workspace or create a project config or anything like that. And this is especially useful for users that have multiple accounts. For example, if you have a personal account and have a company account, you can add both of them and then use both of them to create private repos and push to them as well. So how does that look like? So now you can see Daytona GPLS. I have 3 Git providers, one of which is GitHub, and then I can do Daytona GP add, and I can add GitHub again. I won't add anything here. I'll just add some dummy token. We also added one more field to the Git providers, which is the alias. And the alias essentially allows you to identify the Git provider config based on the alias you input, or it will just default to the username if you leave it empty. It will fail now because I don't have the required token inputted, but if I did, it would basically allow me to add another GitHub Git provider and then use it in Daytona as well. The breaking change with this was that I've updated and changed some properties in the Git provider model, which means that you need to either remove all the Git providers and add them again, or just open the database with SQLite and run these 2 SQL commands, which will basically just update the provider ID and alias so everything functions correctly after this breaking change. Then we have read workspace and project logs on start-stop by Unsuman. So this is a cool feature where when you start and stop a workspace, the logs of the workspace will actually be displayed in the UI or in the terminal. This is just a convenience, so you know what's going on while you're actually starting and stopping the workspace. So you don't, think that it's stuck somewhere. You see now the logs and see what's going on. Then we have add provider and target during create and provider labels. So this is a feature regarding providers and targets. As you can see now, when I do Daytona create, let's actually do Daytona create just to skip the prompt here. And when you do Daytona create and when you choose a target, here in this screen, you will also get an option to automatically install the providers that you don't have and add a target for them as well. So for example, if I want to add an AWS target, it will first install the AWS provider and then prompt me immediately to add a target, which will then be used to create a workspace. So again, just a convenience. And also one more thing, Daytona provider ls. Now you can see let's say the name of the provider or the label of the provider, which is just a human readable label of the provider. So you don't have to look at the, let's say, the code name of the provider itself. Then we have add pagination to all Git APIs. So this is an improvement, actually a pretty big improvement that touched upon all the Git providers, and it basically made all the APIs like Git PRs, Git repos, Git organizations or namespaces, all of them now accept pagination parameters. So when you have a list of a lot of repos or namespaces, you can then load more results in the TUI. Unfortunately, I can demo that because I'm under the limit on all my Git providers, under 100 repos. If I had more, a new option called load more would show up in the UI, which you can then click and load more results from the API programmatically. Then we have, this was done by Abhishek, and then we have the next feature, which is skip target selection when installing providers during target set. So this is just a small UX tweak, which basically skips one TUI step, so you don't have to click through the TUI. It remembers your choice during target set. Then we have update Git provider command. This is a new command that we introduced in this release, which is Daytona GP or Git provider update, which allows you to update the Git provider. This is especially useful if you set an expiration date for your token, and then you don't have to remove the Git provider, add a new one. You can just update the token in the Git provider and use it normally later. So it just speeds up the whole process. Then we have accept Git provider alias flag and make them unique. So here, this is a new flag we also introduced in this release, which is Daytona create. Let's do that -- help. It's the, sorry, let me just get this wider. So it's the Git provider config flag. This flag essentially allows you to override the, let's say, auto detection of the Git provider, and then set your own that you feel is more appropriate for the workspace and also for the project config. And this also now accepts the ID or the alias of the configuration, so you don't have to actually get the ID of the configuration itself. You can just use the alias which you set. Then we have accept Git provider, sorry, that was covered. Then we have add support for marking multiple workspace projects for start and stopping by Tarun. So when you do Daytona start or Daytona stop, so Daytona stop, for example, I don't have workspaces, so let's create one just for show. Daytona create local while that's running. So it's essentially we added the component for marking multiple workspaces that was covered in remove. We added it to start and stop, or actually Tarun added it. So you can start and stop multiple workspaces with one single command all at once. So while this gets created, I think it will also go to the ID, which we will gladly skip for now. Whoops, sorry. And then Daytona, for example, Daytona stop, and I can mark the workspace to be stopped, and it will just now stop this one, but you can mark multiple of them as well. So that's it. Then we have choose between multiple Git provider configs by Ivan Dagelic. This is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, during Daytona PC new. You can choose between these multiple Git providers. Let me just check the PR. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, right. Okay, so this is when you do Daytona create from the URL. Sorry, Daytona create from the URL. If you have multiple Git providers that can handle this request, then you will get prompted to choose one Git provider, which is appropriate for that config. So, for example, if I have two GitHubs, it will list two GitHub accounts that can handle this request, so I can choose which one I want to use to actually clone the repo and push to it. This is an important change because Git providers, for public repos especially, you might have multiple accounts that can get the context of the repository, but you don't have multiple accounts which you can actually push to the repository. So this change basically allows you to choose at runtime which Git provider to use. Then, as you can see, just 2 fixes in this release, which was move request submitted message after target selection screen by Ivan. So when you do Daytona create, the first line is always request submitted. We just move the print of that after you select the target, not before. And then fix get provider for HTTP request by me. This is just a small fix that was small regression that was introduced by one of the commits, just a small fix by me. Okay, that's it. And also we have provider updates. So because of 12224, so 1224, that's, which is that? I'm blind. Yeah, okay, this one. So add provider and target during create provider labels. All providers should be updated so that you get the updated labels with them. And you can just run Daytona provider update -- all, and all of them will be updated immediately. Okay, that's 38.0, and then we have 39.0, which was released yesterday. A couple of features, mostly fixes, and a couple of chores. So the first was non-interactive prebuild add update by ABG. This is a new contributor to the repo who implemented Daytona PB help. Sorry, Daytona PB add help -- help. Yeah. As you can see, we added a lot of flags to the prebuild add and update methods, which allow you to actually add and update prebuilds non-interactively, so you don't have to go through the TUI. You can supply all the parameters using flags, and that's it. And then we have improved Git provider config selection by Ivan. So Daytona GPRM, for example, this now uses the TUI that's every, whoops, I removed something, I'm not even sure what. Okay, we lost GitHub accidentally. So this basically reuse the same TUI component for select as does the other select TUIs. Then we have improved Git provider config list. So Daytona GPLS is now improved, a bit cleaner than it was before. Now it now correctly displays all the properties that are relevant to the user, such as the alias, username, API, URL, and the name. Lastly, okay, that's all the features for this release. Then we have a couple of fixes. Git provider update alias, just a small fix of a regression from a commit from a release ago. And then we have update prebuild properties. Again, just I think a one-line fix for this PR. Ensure prebuild is unique per branch. So this is important because you don't now you can have multiple prebuild configs for the same branch. You can just have just one. There's no reason in having multiple prebuild configurations for the same branch because they essentially do the same thing in the end. Then we have resolve nil pointer to reference, just a small fix by Luca. Then an important fix, server stop hanging. So in some situations, the Daytona serve command will actually hang forever, even if you do Control-C. So this was just a fix by me, which I think was introduced by me also. But basically just fixes now, so Daytona serve can be stopped always. And the issue was actually raised by Brian, who found it annoying for a couple of days, but we quickly found the issue. Then we also have a fix allow Control-C in provider install by Brian's Go. So this is when you do Daytona provider install before you can actually Control-C out of the process, and now you can, and the installation process that is actually downloading the file will get aborted, and the file will be removed and cleaned up if you abort the request. Lastly, last fix of the release was get provider config ID when entering custom repos or sample. So this is again a small fix for the Git provider config flag when you do actually not the flag but the actual property itself by Ivan Dagelic. Then we have chores and tests, a small refactor by me for default config generation. So this refactor is also a subtle fix for the let's say default config. It now is generated on request for the first time, and then the server, which the serve command, which generated the config before, now just simply injects the default profile in the already generated config. So just a bit of a cleaner experience there. Then we have the next refactor, which is move API key view package outside of server. This was just let's say, rename of a couple of files, and that's it. And then lastly, reuse the list component across the CLI. So again, a refactor, and now every single list component in our CLI uses the exact same component in the code, which makes it a bit more maintainable and more flexible in that sense. And as I said, we have a new contributor this release, which is ABG 2020, who made their first contribution with the non-interactive pre-build methods. That's it. That's the last two releases from the last office hours last Wednesday. Now let's check out what we have coming up in the next release. So let's see. I don't think anything is merged from yesterday, but what we have coming up is definitely interesting, and that's I think this might get merged until Friday, so it probably will be released on Friday. That's the GOGS Git provider. I'm not even sure how to pronounce this, but let's call it GOGS. That's a new Git provider which will be added. It's an open source provider that is self-hosted, and it's interesting to support it. So why not? We added a bounty for it as well, and Tarun is right on it. So then we have a fix for wrap text on error. So we have a small we have an error that occurs in the TY that is never wrapped in the width of the terminal. So this fix just wraps the error so it gets displayed correctly every time. Then we have checked if dev container file exists before creating. So Ivan actually opened an issue a while ago where if you input the wrong name of the dev container config when you do the advanced config, it will actually go through and it will try to create and read the dev container configuration. It will exit, but the logs won't even show. So I just added a check to the creation process. Before anything is done, we check if the dev container file actually exists in the repo, and then if it does, it throws the error appropriately, and that's appropriately displayed to the user. Then we have feature gitness harness prebuild webhook. So this is a PR that will add gitness to the list of Git providers that support prebuilds as well. Then we have Bitbucket server prebuild webhook. So this is actually opened a while ago, 2 weeks ago, but it's on hold because of some Bitbucket server shenanigans with the authorization and stuff. So this is a bit on hold while we get everything tested. And lastly, I think I mentioned this also in the last release, the Git commit signing using SSH and GPG. As you can see, it's quite a discussion on this PR, but this will get merged before Friday. So we will finally have that feature as well, where you can sign all commits using SSH or GPG keys through Daytona automatically. You just add the necessary key to Daytona, and Daytona takes care of the rest. So that's it. That's the plan for the next release as well. I think we covered all of the, let's say, bullet points of this office hours. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them right now, or off camera, or on Slack, or Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. And that's it. Also, one piece of exciting news: we are at 8.9K stars, so closing in on 9, and hopefully in the next office hours will be above 9K. Thanks for being here as always, and see you all again next week.